Financial Minds Meet the Experts. I'm Jaime Agostino. On this podcast, we're joined by financial industry experts to talk about topics, trends, and themes that credit union professionals need to know about. Today, we're talking with Meredith of Wolf & Company about preparing credit unions for AI-driven automation. Mary, would you mind sharing just a little bit about yourself with our audience?
Certainly. My name's Meredith. I go by Mary. I've been with Wolf & Company for 18 years. I'm a partner at the firm. I oversee our internal audit practice, but I grew up in our data analytics team. So from the day I started at Wolf & Company, I was a member of the team. I came to oversee that team and oversee our model validation services. And because of that rich history, I actually became the strategic leader of our internal automation initiative, as well as assisting our clients embrace automation. So I'm really excited to be here today talking with you, Jaime.
Oh, wonderful. Well, I'm so happy you were able to join me today. So let's look at strategy and alignment. You know, a colleague of yours recently wrote an article that stresses the importance of aligning AI initiatives with business goals. For credit unions seeking to use AI meaningfully, what would be some concrete examples of use cases?
Yeah, I think it's really, really important to make sure that you're strategically aligned. AI and automation in general can fall into the same patterns that we've been hearing about for decades with data analytics and things, right? There's this new shiny object in the room and everyone feels the need to chase it and go after it. And so often people are chasing a fad versus making strategic business decisions. And when you chase fads, you're going to be left with disappointment. Maybe you'll find one that you love, right? Whatever that color is, that was your color that is in season right now. But so often you make a misalignment and you go after things that aren't important. So there certainly isn't a silver bullet. Every credit union who's listening, you know, tomorrow you start on this, it's going to solve your problems. It really takes a inward looking process for that credit union to identify what's causing pain and inconvenience at their credit union and aligning the right tool. Maybe it's AI, maybe it's Gen AI, maybe it's agentic AI, which is all the rage right now, but maybe it's just some solid automation that you need to be deploying and making sure you're using the right solution for that. So if you've got dirty data or really need that to be focused on, that might be a better process automation function where you're not relying on humans to put in the data and using a more automated process to make sure your data is clean. If you're having trouble monitoring your call focus, it might be a great opportunity for a chatbot that can help you there if you're experiencing problems in your lending area. So it's really important to take an inward look of where your problems are and then start with something that's conquerable for your institution, right? Depending on your size, your staff, your capabilities, you want to come with a starting solution to dip your toe in the water and get ready for this automation journey.
All right. Well, I'd love to hear some success in action. Can you share examples of, credit unions that have successfully implemented AI or intelligent automation, maybe, improving a loan processing efficiency or automation of a manual task?
Yeah. So we've been seeing a lot of improvement. We do see a fair amount of credit unions, more so than banks actually, starting to play with automation and AI in underwriting, which is a really cool application. It sounds really great. It has a possibility to include credit scoring and determine factors that we may not be taking into the current underwriting process. I personally wouldn't start there. Again, I'm a big advocate of let's dip our toe, get comfortable, go where we're at, but there's a ton of cool possibilities in the future that people should definitely have on their radar and think about once they've gotten comfortable. Areas that I see in credit unions getting more comfortable with and a good starting point is those chatbot applications. And where I've seen success with those chatbots and our clients using those chatbots is really, again, thinking about the problems and making sure they're setting up the logic structure on those chatbots so they're answering the right questions, right? My least favorite thing is to call someone up and be on a phone tree and talking to the phone and not getting the answers I want. So you want to ensure when you set up your chatbot that you have it programmed to answer the right questions, right? Balance inquiries, small items that aren't invasive will decrease your clog volume on your call lines is where you really want that chatbot to help. And then the more complex, have it shoot right over to a rep to help you with those hands-on things. We've also seen a really big uptake in OCR optimal character recognition applications, and helping with the digitization of loan files and things of that nature so that it can, again, better fit into automated processes and reduce errors through human input. So those are two areas that we've seen a lot of success that are good starting points to get going.
All right. Okay. So when selecting, AI or automation tools, what factors should credit unions consider, and what best practices should they follow when piloting or validating these AI models?
Yeah. So again, a lot of the lessons we've learned over the past couple of decades with data analytics and other system implementations really come into play with AI and automation in general. I always say that you want to make sure that you have three groups well aligned in order to have a pilot go off well. You want to have your IS or IT department in the know because they know where the data is stored. They know what you're going to be able to get access to. They're going to know how much of a pain it is to get access to whatever you're looking for. You want to make sure you have the C-suite alignment so that you've got the money and the time allotted for the project to be successful. And then you want to make sure you have business line people involved to make sure that whatever you're designing and implementing actually solves the problem that you're trying to solve. So it's really important that you have those three legs of the stool in place to have any successful pilot on automation. And then when you're thinking about getting started, I always suggest that you sit back and really do a survey or a landscape of the area. You can work with a consultant, you can do this yourself, but to sit back and focus and identify where those pain points are and how big of a lift it would be to get started on any of them. You want your first pilot to be successful because it's going to set the tone, right? We all have had this experience where something has gone horribly wrong, and no matter how much better it gets in the future, you have such bad memory of it that you can't go back to touch it. So you don't want people within your credit union to get spoiled and think AI automation is the worst, it never works. You want them to have a good first experience. So you want to pick something that's going to be successful, but to help enough to be meaningful. So again, that'll vary a little bit per organization, but it's really important to start small, have a clear outcome of what success is going to look at, and then once you've had success, yell it from the rooftops, right? Make sure everyone hears what happened. And then the great thing, especially because there can be a lot of fear that happens with AI and automation, right? Job replacement, all this stuff. If they hear how it helps their lives get better and isn't replacing them but helping them, then you'll have people coming to you with their problems to solve, and you can queue them up, and you have just a more engaged audience, which again, if you've got people rowing in the same direction and on the enthusiasm train, it helps to make sure that the project's success at the end of the day.
Yeah, well, you had said something about, data preparedness. So what practical steps should credit unions take to assess and improve their data quality, their governance and security before AI adoption?
Yeah, before you go full-fledged into AI, you really need to make sure you've got data projects in place, that your data is clean. Credit unions, just like a lot of financial institutions and organizations really in general, have a bad case of dirty data. It just happens naturally, right? They're long-formed institutions. A lot of them have been through mergers and acquisitions. They've changed systems. Their cores and other systems may have fields that they didn't think they needed, but all of a sudden they decided they needed them. So it's really important to do an inventory of your data, what you've got capability to capture and what you've been capturing. And although it may not be the most fun project to get into to clean that all up, it is going to pay a lot of dividends in the long run to have consistent and correct data. And there's a lot of tools out there through automation or consultants that can help you do that. But you really want to make sure it's clean before you do any full-fledged launches. For those who are super eager to get started, it doesn't need to be perfect, right? And that's part of the journey of picking your first use case. Is if you do that landscape and you know what's good and what has problems, you can align your first pilot to align with your data landscape so that you've got a use case that will rely on data you know is reliable. And then while you're cleaning up the other data, you could be working on that pilot and almost prepare yourself to pivot over there once you're done. That's the ideal world. We all wish we had a magic wand and could do that. But if all forces are able to be controlled, that would be the ideal state.
All right. So, You know credit unions. So many credit unions run on legacy systems. How can they effectively integrate AI into core banking infrastructure, and what change management strategies support a smooth adoption?
Yeah. So cores have come a long way in the last couple of years. The legacy cores for a long time had limited access to your data. I think they woke up a little bit to the fact that this was not going to be a stance that stood for very long with the way tides were going. So they've at least created a posture of being more open and working. So that gives you the starting point. At the end of the day, we do all know this. There's still some limitations and things like that. So a lot of my clients that are doing a lot with data, are either working with a data lake, taking the data out of there and storing it someplace, or using some other sort of middleware software that allows them to integrate different sources. This is a moving target, so who knows, maybe the cores will play completely good and we'll be in an environment that the cores will do it. But in the meantime, what we've been seeing is a lot of data lakes and middleware using to synthesize that data. Also, some of the data that's really important or that's able to validate the information in the core is other documents and electronic copies, loan files, right? Customer agreements, all these things that happen outside of the core that have a lot of credit unions have moved to either electronic copies or OCRing the copies. So you've already got some information that's working outside of the core. So the cores definitely play an important piece of the puzzle, but there are a lot of creative ways that you can get away around the limitations. And again, have some data to work with, even if you feel a little bit horse-tied from your core provider. Change management is really hard. I think that's really the biggest challenge in any adoption item. I said that a lot when we internally at Wolf & Company were rolling out our automation initiative. Like, oh, we can build it, but are they going to use it? So it is really important that you have all of management's buy-in. Again, that three legs of the stool, right? You've got to make sure the C-suite's there. You've got to make sure that they're promoting the adoption of it and that there's monitoring in place to incentivize and reward the actual use of these things that you build. Because everybody knows that person that although everything's now electronic, still has that old paper copy in their desk of, the old policy or whatever. So we have a tendency to embrace what we're comfortable with. So it takes people a little bit of time to shed that off. So it's really important that you have a robust training program, that you have good documentation, and that management and others are holding people accountable to migrating their policies. Otherwise, people are going to slide back because we like what's comfortable.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about, building the right team. Many credit unions, they lack internal data science expertise. What are your recommendations? Should they hire? Should they partner with consultants or, upskilled teams? And how can they foster that effective cross-functional collaboration?
Yeah. So a lot of this has to do with your needs and what's going on. Not every credit union is going to either have the budget or the ability to hire someone on staff immediately. I certainly would, take a look at your IS skill set, see what you can do to augment it, think about it. But if you've got an immediate data need or something that you need to automate, you probably are working with a consultant to deal with those short-term programs. I know we have a data scientist program, a lot of different places do, so you can definitely reach out to those that'll be happy to bridge a gap while you're trying to reach that. Other things is, the environment of the education sphere is changing, and there's a lot of people who are interns or new talent that are learning this in school. So there's an opportunity to partner people just coming out of school with more veteran people to kind of cross-share knowledge and be able to upskill talent that way. I know we've had some local financial institutions that have had a lot of success in that intern program of bringing some new skills to the table, giving them some new guidance that they're not thinking of, and it's really worked well for them. Would I endeavor on a huge project with an intern? No. But again, if you're starting with a pilot and looking to focus it is possible that someone who is taking school for automation, Power Automate, can help you get some easy first wins and again, give you that taste. So there's a lot of different ways. Definitely, it depends on the speed that you're trying to go with and the projects that you're trying to tackle.
Okay. All right. Well, With any change, obviously there's going to be challenges. So let's talk about overcoming these implementation challenges. What common barriers like limited budgets, resistance to change, or data silos, what might credit unions face in AI adoption, and what strategic advice can help them overcome these challenges?
Yeah, I think it is really, we've talked about some of them already, right? There's data challenges, there's people resistance, there's these inborn items, and budget definitely comes up, especially right now in the interest environment. Everyone's uncertain about the economics. It's not a place where people are like, oh, I've got all this money, let me spend it on something. I think people need to take a longer term view of things, and really it comes down to, again, that landscaping that I talked about, right? What problems are we currently facing? Where are the pain points? How can we get improvement? And if you get those top contenders and you do an analysis of what it's actually costing you with those bad processes right now, the investment will pay for itself very quickly on most of these tools. Again, you want to pick the right project, not go crazy off the deep end. This isn't $1 million spend that we hear on the headlines in the news. It's something that'll have a meaningful impact and help us get over the hump. And if you take that approach and you go for small wins and you measure and make sure you have success, you can get over the budget hurdle, which is the number one hurdle that most financial institutions are doing, because it is a spend. Sometimes it's unbudgeted, but we're getting into budget season. So if you haven't started thinking about it, start thinking about getting one project on there. And then I think the last one is, okay, I built it. I know I should be getting ROI on this, but people aren't using it. And how do we make sure we drive adoption? And that's really to make sure that we've got all the programming that needs to happen when you're rolling it out. Making sure you have a good onboarding process, making sure you have continual training documentation, making sure you're updating policies and procedures to really embrace whatever automation and AI, so everyone's using it consistently and you are really getting the desired impact of whatever you've implemented.
Okay. Another area that I think we need to, kind of put a check to is compliance. So compliance in AI, it's essential. So what steps should credit unions take to ensure AI tools meet regulatory standards, considering, some of the frameworks like, GDPR, AML, Equal Credit Opportunity Act? What should we be looking at?
Yeah, this is a very murky space at the moment. I will say, right, there's not a ton of guidance out there. And I was at a financial institutions conference recently where people are like, are we going to get any updated guidance? AI is out there. There's really not a lot in the financial institution space that says what you should or shouldn't do about it. Actually, I think the only guide that has it is the OCC. So I know you're all credit unions, but OCC model risk management guidance says that AI could or could not be considered a model. So super clear, right? This is what we're dealing with. But at a similar conference, they were saying, well, we don't need to rewrite these guidance because the rules are still the rules, whether you're using AI or not. Okay, logically that makes sense. I can get behind that. But still at the end of the day, like, how do I make sure that this opaque black box, whatever we're dealing with, is doing the right thing? So you need to be thinking about it. And right now, more and more financial institutions and credit unions are deploying their own AI. But today, the majority of that is still through third parties. So it's very, very important that your third-party risk management programs are asking questions about AI use. And although I told you, I grew up in data analytics, I oversee the model risk management practice. I would love to say that everything's a model, but I made fun of that line about if it could or could not be a model. It is somewhat true, because depending on what type of AI you're using, if it's generative AI, agentic AI, predictive analytics, if it's a model or not is going to change. So it's really important that you have third parties that are using AI flagged, and that you have someone either at your credit union or a consultant or someone you can talk to say, okay, what are the actual risks presented by this use of AI, and what should I be asking for? We don't have a SOC report over AI. some fintechs and third-party providers don't believe they're a model, so you're not getting model certifications at this point. So it's really an opportunity to work with your third parties and making sure that they're giving you the information that they need to be, to showing that they're doing the items that are controlled. And whether it is model risk management guidance they need to be concerned about, or other AI risk frameworks, that can be determined once you have a good understanding of how they're using the AI, what internal processes they're using, and some validation of your own. But the first thing is to identify what they're doing it. Because again, in the chase for the shiny object, people tend to say they're doing things, like they use the shiny word, like agentic AI is all over the place. And it's like, is that really agentic AI, or is it really just you have multiple generative AIs? And it's important to understand the difference, because the risks will be different.
Okay. What should a credit union's AI monitoring framework look like? How can they, ensure continuous performance tracking, model refinement, and, responsible scaling across functions?
Yeah. So if you've gone into the deep end, we're done dipping our toes, and we've got a full-size AI model working at the institution or with a third party, it is important that you are getting information that either it's being tested internally or by the third party. And a lot of the times, even if it's internal, there is some sort of black box component, right? Generative AI works almost like the human brain, right? How did it reach that decision? Well, it reached it by congregating all this different information and came out with it. It can't tell you step by step everything that it did. So you need to be ready to challenge it. So if we're talking about fair lending, right, we're using it for credit underwriting decisions. We want to make sure it's fair lending. It's important that we're periodically testing the model and actually presenting real life situations and making sure we're getting the results that we want, right? Is it approving the applicants that we would have approved? Is it rejecting the ones we shouldn't? Is there any sort of trending information that's coming out of it that is giving us indications that the model may be getting offsite? And it is the more critical that the information is coming out of the model, like nobody wants a fair lending violation, the more periodic we're going to be needing to doing that monitoring, because it's really important that it is doing right turn and things of that nature.
All right. So here's my tough question. We're going to talk a little bit about cybersecurity and ethical considerations. With AI introducing, new attack vectors and risk, what cybersecurity measures do you advise, and how can ethics and fairness, particularly bias detection and explainability, be embedded into AI deployment?
Yeah. So I won't lie, and I'm not a cybersecurity expert, but it's scary times, right? We can all agree. We've seen the deep fakes. We've seen all these items. It is a scary time. And as much as AI is helping, and we didn't talk a lot about how AI is helping a lot in fraud detection, and especially with third-party providers, the information that they're able to congregate and do trending is super cool. Unfortunately, it's also working on the other side of complete evil and working around everything. So I don't have all the solutions. If I did, I would be a billionaire right now. But I will emphasize that layered security is going to continue to be more and more important. It is vitally important that you are investing in new outcoming fraud detection, because the game is continually changing, and whatever you were using 5 years ago is not, if it's not updating, it is not good enough anymore. But also layering it so it's not just voice and it's not just password, and that you've got notification to your customer members is going to be so important, because it's just insane what they can do these days. So if you're just relying on one point of authentication, it's going to be scary. When it comes to ethical considerations, I talked a little bit about model bias. I could go on a whole rant about how there's bias in all data, and it's also a little bit scary, but you need to be thinking about that, right? And that's why testing your models before they deploy, testing them in real life situations where they should be working or not working is important, and keeping an eye on them, because there is bias. You don't even know it, but there's bias in all data, which is a different podcast we can do. So it is really important. It's explainable. And then the other thing on ethical consideration is just to be thoughtful of what you're doing with that data, right? There's more and more data. It's a super exciting time, but you've got to walk this really fine line of being there in the moment that your member wants you, and being a little too close, right? You've got a lot of data, so you want to be helpful to them, but if you're overly helpful, they're going to think you're creepy because they're like, why do you know this? What are you doing? I don't want you in my data. So there's definitely a fine line that I'm sure is going to get refined in the years to come, but we're very much walking on a tightrope of how can we use this information to be informative, helpful, and not infringing on anyone's personal space. And that'll be continually to evolve.
Absolutely. Well, Mary, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed the conversation and all of your insights in regards to AI and automation. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was a joy.
Good. This episode of Financial Minds is brought to you by Viso Financial's InfoSec Networking Group. One of the greatest threats to credit union today lies in information security. Fortunately, it's not a unique phenomenon. It's a challenge that every institution faces. With this new InfoSec networking group hosted by Viso Financial, we're inviting credit unions to be part of a dedicated space to connect, collaborate, and share best practices around cybersecurity and risk management. The group will convene for this 1-hour virtual meeting to exchange ideas and practical solutions we can all use to fortify our information security positions. Join the InfoSec networking group to build a network, strengthen your knowledge, and help shape the future of the credit union security. For more information on the InfoSec networking group's first meeting, visit Viso Financial's website at www.vfccu.org. As always, thanks for listening and make it a great day.